The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind of the Tathagata. Today is the 6th day of our 7-day session here at Mountain Gate in northern New Mexico in August 2022. After a disruption yesterday in the internet, we have now gone back online thanks to Michael Ferreira of Electric Sheep in Taos, who came all the way down here and troubleshot and determined it was a malfunctioning router, which he replaced, saying it went out too soon. This new one's on my dime. It was very kind of him. He has been extremely helpful to Mountain Gate for making Wi-Fi internet available and is very responsive to calls for help. So today I'd like to share with you what I was going to share with you yesterday. It has to do with physiology, actually. And I'd like to start with sharing something from the AARP newsletter, an interview with Jill Bolte Taylor, who some of you may already know is the neuroscientist, Harvard-trained neuroscientist, who had a stroke, a pretty major stroke, a very unusual type of stroke that happened as a result of congenital brain development, and ended up it being a positive, life-changing experience. If you want to know more about her, there's at least one TED Talk in which she appears, fully recovered from that stroke that left her so incapacitated initially, she could not talk, she could not walk, she couldn't basically do anything for herself. It brought her all the way back to infant level, more or less. It took her 8 years to recover, but recover she did. And through the process, as I said, her life changed radically in very positive ways. So let me share from this article, which is called Stroke of Luck. A brain scientist's cerebral shutdown gave her a mental breakthrough and a happier life. In her best-selling memoir, My Stroke of Insight, which was published in 2008 and is available on Amazon.com in paper, Harvard-trained brain researcher Jill Bolte Taylor, who was 49 at the time of the interview, tells of the rare form of stroke she suffered in 1996 that shut down the left hemisphere of her brain, where language, logic, and linear thought are based. And I would suggest also where we are trained to live from through our education system, through society, and so on, are, as very small children, as infants really, as when we're born, our brain is not set up quite in the same way as it is gradually as we grow older. I mean, it has the potential there, but it has many potentials. It's filled with potentials, many of which are pruned away based on our experience. And very small children naturally explore from a wordless place in their mind. They don't yet have language. They don't yet think, but they are quite aware. My earliest memory, in fact, is when I was probably about 6 months old. I was not walking yet. I could sit up by myself, and that happens around 6 months. And of course, I was not talking. And my mother was holding me, and we were outdoors, and she was standing talking to a couple of other women. And one of the women had an infant in one of those, we used to call them English baby carriages that actually has springs on it. And the woman said to my mother, "Why don't you put her down in the carriage instead of having to hold her?" Regarding me. And so she put me down in the carriage, and I remember two special things about that. One is the feeling of unsettledness, as this carriage was not a steady place to sit in because of those springs. And the other was that this tiny infant, might have been maybe 2-3 months old, was I was trying to communicate with that infant, not through words, but the way everyone communicates, through energy. And whether you realize it or not, we still, even as adults, interact through energy. We communicate through energy. And it's actually known that, for example, the heart, the electricity of the heart can be recorded. It can be picked up at least 8 feet away from the beating heart. And it's felt that perhaps it could be much farther than that. It just hasn't been tested any further than that. Brain also. It really is so. And when you talk about the Buddhist view of this, there is no separation between us. And this experience of Jill's was an example of a real experience of that. But if any of us remember being very, very small before we were talking, we experienced life like that. And it was what she describes as a right brain experience. It was not a linear experience. It was not an experience that depended on words or even was through words. It was an experience of pure being, of pure presence. This is what we're trying to reconnect with through our Zen practice, and this is why it's being brought up today, because it is vital. Let's continue with this article. After 8 grueling years of rehab, she regained full brain function, yet could still access at will what she describes as a state of complete peace and well-being. And then the interviewer asks, "Can a person tap into this bliss without suffering a stroke?" And I don't know, bliss is kind of a funny word. Bliss implies something, kind of a lack of consciousness in a certain way, but an altered consciousness in which someone is just so full of beyond happiness that that's what there is. In this case, I mean, if you remember what it was spoken of was complete peace and well-being. That is what presence brings to us, complete peace and well-being. Of course, there's presence with trauma, which doesn't bring us that necessarily, but there is an aspect of it that it does. Can a person tap into this bliss without suffering a stroke? And she responds, absolutely. When you're really paying attention to the richness of the present moment, that's right-minded awareness. The left hemisphere is preoccupied with past and future, projecting fears, contemplating ideas that aren't relevant to the here and now. Once you realize you have these two different brains, you can learn to choose moment by moment how you want to live. You can choose moment by moment how you want to live. Of course, you do need the push as well as the pause to function properly. And the question is the push and the pause. I use the tools of the left hemisphere to push into the world, but as soon as it becomes stressful, I can feel that in my body, and I switch to the right hemisphere to pause. I may prefer the pause because it feels better. I'm more joyful, cooperative. People like me better. As I recovered my skills, I consciously chose not to let that left brain circuitry dominate again. Stress is a frame of mind. If I'm in traffic and there is no solution in sight, I relax and enjoy the few moments I have. Standing in line in the store, I observe rather than engage. You can say, quote, if I pull the plug on this circuit, I don't have to think stressful thoughts anymore. Any of us who have experienced a true moment of presence know how amazing that feels. And as we go through our Zen practice, that is what we were moving towards. Every time we extend the out breath, we let go the left brain cognitive yada yada and move more completely into the present moment. And as we continue doing that over and over again, it begins to weaken the habit pattern of living in our intellect, in our left brain, in our estimates of the future, our ruminations of the past, and our analysis of each moment, which is really a recipe for challenge, if not pain and suffering. It's interesting that science has brought to the fore through Jill's stroke that this is actually a physiological option, that we can choose to opt out whenever we want to of the thinking brain. Now, there is a little bit of a downside because we can use that opting out where we're actually not going into the present moment, but we're opting out of all of it. That's called dissociation. And that is something that people will do in response to trauma. And if it's significant trauma and ongoing trauma in particular, we end up living in that dissociated space. And that's not healthy. It's not peace. It's not well-being. It is a pulling ourselves into an inner cave and shutting the door. It feels safe. It feels dangerous to be present. And that can come up for people in practice who have experienced any level of trauma, whether even what we might not even term trauma, just uncomfortable situations in our life. And pretty much everybody. I don't think you can grow up in the world without experiencing an uncomfortable situation. Not sure even the Buddha did. In fact, he had his level of curiosity that took him out into the village at night, where he saw what are known as the four sights: the sick person, the old person, the corpse, and then the spiritual practitioner. And that brought a tremendous amount of angst up in him. This is how we have to live? This is all that we're going to be able to experience? We're born, and if we're lucky, we grow old. But then there's growing old with all its infirmities and the losses that go along the way. All of us are going to die. Being born comes with a death sentence. And we may get quite ill There's so much illness. I mean, right now, monkeypox is in the news, as well as the coronavirus. And the coronavirus has been with us for now several years, and appears that it will continue to be with us for the rest of everybody's life. So even if we haven't been raped or held at gunpoint or beaten or any of the other kinds of things that cause overt trauma, we have experienced times in our lives when we're not comfortable, let's put it that way, where we're challenged, where we're maybe frightened or perplexed or embarrassed or various other mind states, angry. And when we come to Zazen and we start doing the extended out breath, and our upper levels of our mind, our habitual ongoing micro thought process, it begins to dampen down, these past experiences can come up to consciousness, and we can feel uncomfortable or frightened or have flashbacks if it's that major. And it's something that people don't want to do, and yet it is important in terms of becoming free from them. But the bottom line really is the only way to awakening, as was said in an earlier Teisho, this sesshin, is presence, profound and total presence, the kind of presence that Jill had when unwittingly her left hemisphere shut down. Only we don't have to shut down our left hemisphere, we just have to withdraw from it and emphasize the right brain, the experiencing brain, as opposed to the thinking and creating stories brain. And the more we do that, which initially can be frightening for people because it can feel like we don't have control, particularly if we've had any level of stress in our life, and particularly if we've had any trauma. But persist. And if it's trauma, or if it's a major experience that is starting to come up for you from your past, then it can help a great deal to work with a therapist who's trained in working with these kinds of things. And what is available to each one of us through this entire process is the kind of profound peace and well-being that Jill experienced and continues to experience now. It takes a long time, but there is progress, even though it's not necessarily obvious. And the thing about that is when we learn to practice absolute awareness, total presence with the experience in our bodies, in the moment, even when there's a situation that we're involved in that is very challenging or very difficult or very frightening, there is automatically space in which the fear recedes, the difficulty recedes. It's there. We don't ignore it, and we're not shutting it down, but it recedes and gives us space in which to respond to the circumstances most fully, most freely, most clearly, and most optimally. Unfortunately, our modern society emphasizes not doing that, emphasizes escaping from feelings, emphasizes escaping into playing with our digital toys. And I'm as guilty as most people are with that. I check the news periodically. I do my email. Right now, there's a lot of it having to be done because we're going through some needs for corroboration and submittal of documents for Mountain Gate. But that's just half of the brain. The other half has the ability to simply relax into the moment, to feel the quality of the air, to sense everything around one, to feel the sunshine, to enjoy the forest. And for example, one person recently told me, the trees talk to me. And I don't doubt it, but I don't believe they talk in words. Everything communicates because there is no separation. And if we allow ourselves to settle deeply within and let go of our left brain cognitive processes temporarily, they won't go away. And in fact, when we take a little bit of a break from them, they come back more effectively. We find when we live more in our right brain, or allow ourselves to have right brain experiences, then when we need to use thought, when we need to use planning, when we need to use cognition, it comes more clearly, more effortlessly. And beyond that, our whole life becomes more clear and more effortless. If we are in the arts, our art, our architecture, our planning, our music, our drawing or painting or sculpting, our gardening, everything comes with a very different quality, freely and most creatively. We're able to tune in to the plants in the garden, for example, and have a sense of exactly what they need at which times, whether they're being overwatered or underwatered, or what they need in the way of fertilizer or whatever. We no longer have this monkey on our back, is what I describe it as, that is sitting there and saying, oh, that was a stupid drawing. Why didn't you do it better? These kinds of things are what hold us back from life. But when we are able to develop increasing awareness, increasing presence at will, our life is very different. And this is what Zen practice can do for us. We're not trying to create something that's called enlightenment. Enlightenment is insight into the present, insight into how things really are. And the more we are able to be present in each moment, the closer we are to insight. And I say insights because the deeper we go, the greater the insights are, and the deeper the insights are. So, this is an important aspect of practice. And I can't stop here without also adding the fact that in addition to coming to awakening, presence will also make us aware of where our behavior is less than optimal, perhaps not very kind, less compassionate, where we are motivated by greed, anger, or the illusion that we are somebody that we think we are. And when these things come up, it's very, very important to open to them, to embrace the discomfort that they bring, and to be as present as possible with that discomfort and with that revelation. And in this way, that behavior begins to weaken. And we become more and more the person we are meant to be. The person we already are is just covered up with ideas, thoughts, habit patterns, conditioning. And through utter presence, we can become free of it. And there was one more writing that I wanted to share with you. Actually, I think it was two more writings. This goes along with the no boundaries. And this is something that Thich Nhat Hanh wrote. I have a disciple in Vietnam who wants to build a stupa for my ashes when I die. He and others want to put a plaque with the words, "Here lies my beloved teacher." I told them not to waste the temple land. Do not put me in a small pot and put me in there. I said, I don't want to continue like that. It would be better to scatter the ashes outside to help the trees to grow. I suggested that if they still insist on building a stupa, that they have the plaque say, I'm not in here. But in case people don't get it, they could add a second plaque. I'm not out there either. If still people don't understand, then you can write on the third and last plaque, I may be found in your way of breathing and walking. This body of mine will disintegrate, but my actions will continue me. In my daily life, I always practice to see my continuation all around me. We don't need to wait until the total dissolution of the body to continue. We continue in every moment. If you think that I am only this body, then you have not truly seen me. So we have our work cut out for us. But what amazing work it is, and what joy to have found it. Work hard. It is so worth it. I thank you for listening. I'll stop now and recite the 4 vows.